We've got Steve Townsend. Yes, it's the same surname. He is my father. But he is the NEU caseworker for the area. So we can't really not have somebody who, if something is said wrong, he's the one who comes in and says, well, actually, no, they can say that. So I thought we'll get some expertise from him. He is also the TUC, the Trades Union Congress's International Affairs Committee member as well. So, Dad.
Thank you. And a very proud dad. Before I go on, I just want to say that Georgia went to Palestine in 2019. It affected her so greatly that on her return she set up the Colchester PSC because of what she saw in Palestine, and this was well before October the 7th. Some of the things moved her to tears, and she was told directly, I'm afraid we don't want your tears, we want you to just keep speaking about us. So that's why this has been organised, so that we can still speak about it, but know when we're going to get into trouble if we speak about it at the wrong time. As Georgia said, I'm the caseworker for North East Essex. If you're in my union, the NEU, if you do get pulled up, if you're a teacher or an education worker, if you get pulled up for maybe saying something inappropriate, it will be me that comes to try and bail you out. So I'm just giving you an idea of what I would find relatively easy to bail you out on and the things that I would find impossible to bail you out on. First of all, I did have a PowerPoint, which is here. You can't see it from there, but I will have to talk my way through it. And the first three things are the three areas that the international NEU stand up for. Eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, and any other conduct that is prohibited by the Equality Act in 2010. The Equality Act in 2010 it gives protected characteristics, one of which is race and political belief, another one is political beliefs or religious beliefs. So we have to start with that very idea that we are going to stick to being against any sort of victimisation, any sort of harassment, any sort of discrimination between different religions. So when we do discuss this, if we discuss this, that has to be by the forefront of our minds. The National Union advice on this, there is a leaflet. Anybody wants it, they can let Georgia know your email address. I'll send you a copy of the leaflet that's issued by them. But it starts by saying it is an issue that needs to be dealt with sensitively and by people with a good knowledge of both current events and the history of the conflict. In other words, if you have no knowledge or very little knowledge of this whole situation, the union's view is don't talk to the children about it. You're likely to give them wrong advice or biased advice, and if you are a teacher, if you are working in education, that will be enough to have you disciplined, possibly lose your job. I suspect most of the people here probably do know a fair bit about it, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But that's the first stage we have to go through, and it is a theme that comes all the way through my speech, I'm afraid. If you're a teacher, there are guidelines that you must adhere to. The Education Act 1996, sections 406 and 407, require that governors, heads and local authorities ensure, this is the quote from it, they ensure where controversial topics are brought to the children's attention, they are given a balanced presentation of conflicting views. In other words, if kids come into your classroom and they say, as somebody did to me in my classroom, what's this I hear about them chopping off babies' heads? You shouldn't say, sorry, I'm not going to discuss it with you. We have a duty to discuss it with them. But it is the governors, the heads and the local authority that have control over that duty. So they should have a policy in your school which says what you can and can't say. That policy could be anything from advice for you as a teacher on what to say, or it could be advice to send it to this particular person who has now got the responsibility of dealing with it. However, there are occasions when you're in a classroom and you can't just turn around and say no. I've written here, just because you have an opinion, it doesn't mean you have to express it. In a school situation, as a teacher or a support worker, you are not entitled to express your opinion. It is written down in your contract that your political opinions are not to be discussed with the children. You can discuss politics, but not with your... When you're wearing badges, as I do sometimes in school, that make it very, very clear, they know that I have a day off every so often to work for the union, they pretty much know what my political persuasion is, But it's still against the law for me to go in and say, election coming up, I'm voting Labour, how are you doing? I'm still not allowed to do that, and I can get into a lot of trouble for doing that. For most teachers, it's just better not to bring the subject up. And I know that's not necessarily what people really want to hear, but going into a classroom and saying, right, what about that Palestine situation then? That is just the wrong way, because there will be children in there that aren't ready for that yet. It's also, though, best not to ignore it if it is brought up by children. So, my 3 reactions that you should have to a child coming into your class and saying, I was watching on the telly last night and I saw a load of Palestinians being bombed, what's that all about? Or something similar. First, and I'll explain this one, tell them it's not appropriate to discuss it, and that you'll arrange for it to be discussed later. It's a common thing, and anybody who's been a teacher will know this, where you're doing a lesson they don't want to learn, they don't want to take part in, and as you walk past and say, why aren't you doing that? And they go, yeah, but what about that football match where Manchester United beat Liverpool last night? They don't really want to discuss the football, they just don't want to do the work. And that's when you as a teacher should turn around and go, yes, it was very interesting, but let's get on with the work and let's not discuss that now. I'll discuss it with you at your break time if you want. They never come back at break time to discuss it. So if that's what they're trying to do, it's best to say, I will give you a time to discuss it, but not now. Right now, I want you to finish that essay I've asked you to write. Tell them that you'll find someone more knowledgeable to discuss it with them. If you don't feel competent, if you don't feel knowledgeable enough, don't attempt it, because you'll get yourself into trouble. Find somebody. Go and see a union rep and they will find somebody who can talk to them. Or the last one, ensure that there is enough time and it's a safe space for that discussion. So if you're halfway through a lesson, I'm teaching current affairs when I go back on Tuesday, halfway through a discussion on current affairs, one of them asks about this, I've got to go, right, well, there's only 3 minutes left of the lesson, so I can't do it. Or, well, there's half an hour left of the lesson, the class are quite calm at the moment, let's have a go at this. And then you set the ground rules, the discussion has got to be calm, it's got to be balanced, and each child has some rule as to when they can or can't speak and how they can express an opinion, and that opinion cannot be racist, insulting, victimising, or any of those things. Once you've got that situation in place and you're confident with it, then you can have a discussion with those children. But in my PowerPoint it comes up with a big flash here that says, but do not discuss it if you're not confident. Don't risk it, you'll just get yourself into trouble. More advice from National Education Union: give equal importance to conflicting views. So even if most of your class believes that the Palestinians are suffering terribly at the hands of the Israelis that are trying genocide, you've still got to try and get an opposing point of view, because it has to have balance, and sometimes that calls upon you to give the opposing point of view. Don't express opinions as facts. So, for example, Israeli genocide is an opinion, it's not a fact. And you must say that is some people's opinion. Not implying that there is a correct opinion. That yes, it's right to believe that the Palestinians are suffering, it's not right to believe that the Israelis have the right to retaliate. Whatever your own opinion, it's got to be balanced to the children, because ultimately, which I think we heard before, the children have got to make up their minds. It's not for us to tell them what's thing. As a teacher, you have to challenge the one-sided consensus if it emerges in the room. Whichever side, you have to say, but what about? Have you thought about? And you have to give the counter viewpoint. And present that all the information and opinion that we've discussed is open to interpretation, qualification and contradiction. That even if as a class you come to a conclusion, you have to say that that is just this class. Outside this class there are differing opinions who take that same information that we've looked at and we've interpreted it in a different way. So, how do you do that? Well, I've given an example which I was going to put on the board, but this is something that I may use in one of my lessons. It's 2 bullet points. First bullet point. There are those that believe that Israel has the right to defend themselves following the Hamas attack on October the 7th. Others believe that the response has been unreasonable. It's believed that 1,349 Israelis were killed. Some are still being held hostage. It's also believed that 32,482 Palestinians have been killed in the response. Now, I read that and I think well, that's in favour of the Palestinians. But it's not. It's a completely unbiased account. There is nothing in there that is biased. It's factual, it's all been taken from research that I've done, and with everything I say about one side, I give a similar point about the other. If they draw the conclusion that the difference between 1,349 Israelis killed and 33,482 Palestinians killed, if they have the conclusion that that isn't a reasonable response, that's got to be their conclusion. Now, we've all come to that conclusion, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. Well, if we can come to that conclusion, so can they. We don't have to tell them that's the conclusion they need to come to. They can come to it themselves. I've put 6 statements here, which I was going to put on the wall, so that you could tell me which one you thought you'd be disciplined for. But I'll read each one out, and you know, put your hand up if you think you could be disciplined. I've got 30 seconds. Okay, so you have to put your hands up quickly. Today we're going to talk about genocide in the Middle East. Could you be disciplined? Put your hands up, yes. Yes, absolutely you could be, because that is an opinion being stated as a fact. The Israelis have no right to take over Palestinian land. Put your hands up if you think, yes, you could be disciplined. Of course you could, it's an opinion. The conflict in Palestine at the moment was not started by Hamas in October the 7th. Put your hands up if you think you could be disciplined. So long as you gave it some more detail, so long as you said the conflict between Palestine and Israel started all the way back in 1948, then that would be something you could say. That it wasn't started by Hamas. The latest was started by Hamas, but the whole conflict in Palestine wasn't. So that would be something that if you were disciplined for, I could get you off. 1,349 Israelis were killed and 10,000 Palestinian children have been killed. I don't think you can be disciplined. This is the one my wife had a problem with. Yeah, you can be disciplined because they're not equal. 1,349 Israelis, soldiers, men, women, children, but 10,000 Palestinian children. So you're singling out the children to make them go, oh wow, 10,000 children being killed, that's awful. So no, you would be in trouble for that one. A quote from Netanyahu: those who brutally murdered our children also murder their own children. Could you use that quotation? Put your hands up if you think you're going to be disciplined. They may well try, but they would fail. It's a fact. And so long as you backed it up with some balance and explain why Netanyahu said that, because he felt that him killing their children was not his fault, it was their fault because they started it, which I'm sure lots of children in the playground use that excuse, not for killing children, but... Alright, the last one. Israeli airstrike killed 7 aid workers delivering food to Palestinians. Put your hands up if you think you could be disciplined for that. You're getting it, aren't you? It's an absolutely factual statement that even Netanyahu and the Israelis have agreed that they killed aid workers, not members of Hamas pretending to be aid workers. So you get away with that. But you can see, so long as you've got balance, so long as what you've said is truthful, and so long as it wasn't you that decided to say it, apropos nothing in particular from the children, you should be okay. But don't start it unless a child asks you first, and then, like I say, only if you've got time to make sure that you can deal with it appropriately. The last thing you want is, well, let's start by looking at how awful Palestinians have been treated. Oh, look, there's no more time, let's all go to break. Then you'd be in so much trouble, and I wouldn't be able to save your job. Okay, thank you.